While most have viewed Nelson Mandela as a symbol of a new era in South Africa, one prominent U.S. politician had no problem calling him a terrorist.
The Trump administration announced Monday that it was returning Cuba to the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism.
The U.S. State Department has Nelson Mandela on a terrorist list.
Israel has a right to try and target those civilians.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
What the Senate Intelligence Committee labeled torture in its blistering report this past week, the former VP today called necessary.
17 years ago, these pictures of smiling American guards abusing Iraqi prisoners shook the world, uncovering the dark side of the US's war on terror.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney was unapologetic today and said the Bush administration got it right.
The gut-wrenching pictures of sexual abuse, humiliation and torture of detainees at Abu Ghraib prison sent Washington into damage control. Approximately 70 to 90% of the prisoners were mistakenly detained. Most of them were picked up in random military sweeps and checkpoints, and many of them were women and teenagers.
I take the threat very seriously. I take the fact that he develops weapons of mass destruction.
I think we will find weapons of mass destruction. I think it's important that we do. He's lying to him when he says he doesn't have weapons of mass destruction.
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Exactly 10 years ago today, a year and a half after the U.S. invaded Iraq, Americans finally learned the truth about weapons of mass destruction. The man charged with finding WMDs released this report, revealing that he'd found nothing.
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
We did not find stocks of either chemical or biological weapons. Active nuclear weapons program, no. We found no evidence, nor do we judge that there was one.
There are deadly chemical weapons being housed right here in Kentucky.
For months, Israel has faced accusations it used white phosphorus indiscriminately on a town near the Israel-Lebanon border. The allegations were at the center of an investigation this past October from Amnesty International. Now, an investigation from the Washington Post has found that the white phosphorus shells used in that attack were made in the United States.
In Vietnam, America dropped more than 19 million gallons of herbicides, with Agent Orange being the favorite. It's also not water-soluble, meaning it doesn't degrade easily, and genetic effects can be passed down through generations after one person's exposed. Agent Orange has been linked to prostate cancer, lung cancers, Parkinson's disease, and birth defects, among other diseases.
Village, one of 13 she has set up. She believes many of the children in them have been affected by Agent Orange, a defoliant dropped by US forces.
The CIA and law enforcement have supposedly been funneling drugs into the inner cities and to the African American community in particular as part of a covert effort to stop them attaining stability, building wealth, and achieving political power.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
In 1979, the dictatorial government of Nicaragua was overthrown by socialist revolutionaries called the Sandinistas. In response, right-wing groups known as the Contras began a brutal paramilitary campaign, receiving money and weapons from the CIA as part of the Cold War struggle against the Soviet Union.
If we cut off the freedom fighters, we will be giving the Soviets a free hand in Central America.
So the Contras and their CIA backers had to find new ways of funding their struggle. What they found was cocaine. And that not only did the CIA know about these activities, they allowed them to continue in order to help fund the Contras war effort.
Well, do you know any major Arab ally that embraces ISIL?
I know major Arab allies who fund them.
In 1951, the United States CIA head had invested in a fruit company in Guatemala. But then the government did something that hurt their profits, so he started a 36-year civil war that ended in genocide.
But thanks to CIA funding and training, this guy hit the jackpot and became one of the leaders of the Mujahideen, fighting a holy war against the Afghani government and later against the Soviets too. Now, I can't stress how massive this secret operation was. They were spending $630 million a year on the Mujahideen. At one point, the CIA got the University of Nebraska to print these educational children's books that they spread all over Afghanistan. It taught you all sorts of useful stuff like how to behead infidels or how to count to 10 in the most fucked way possible. And the CIA won. For a period, the Soviets intervened to prop up their ally, but that eventually bankrupted them and they withdrew, and a few years later, the Afghani government fell to the Mujahideen. Women could no longer go to school. The country descended into a 20-year civil war to decide which group of CIA-funded right-wing fundamentalist arseholes would run the country.
There was concern about Pine Gap, and at that stage in the mid-1970s, it was not public knowledge what was going on there. And the Prime Minister was on the cusp of revealing details about this facility in the middle of Australia. The Australian Prime Minister, Edward Gough Whitlam, was sacked by the Governor-General, and one of the big ones is whether, of course, the American intelligence had any role to play in prompting Sir John Kerr to do.
Now, the US was happy whining and dining these guys for decades until a bunch of Saudis flew some planes into the World Center. Suddenly, the US started questioning their love for right-wing Islamic extremists, and they wanted revenge. But not against Saudi Arabia, they're the US's allies, no one's touching them, obviously. They went after Afghanistan, because that's where bin Laden was hiding. Now, the Taliban had been trying to get rid of bin Laden for years before September 11, and when they heard the Americans were going to invade, they were like, fuck, okay, we'll give it Laden up to the International Criminal Court, just don't invade us. But as you know, the Americans invaded anyway, and started the longest war in American history. 20 years and hundreds of thousands of dead bodies. So, why did they do this? Well, maybe it's so they could have bases bordering Iran, China, and Russia, or maybe it was just to launder money for the military-industrial complex.
Bear crawl, scene 1.
Just started doing hand wave.
Oh, they're walking away.
Murder, torture, summary executions. These are just some of the things Australia's lauded special forces are accused of doing when they were deployed in Afghanistan between 2007 and 2013. But finally, more than a decade after these crimes occurred, someone's gone to jail. No, not the guy who executed at point-blank range a farmer cowering in a wheat field. And no, not the guy who allegedly machine-gunned a one-legged, unarmed man, then drank beer out of his prosthetic leg. The first man Australia sent to jail over war crimes allegations is the whistleblower.
You don't really have a positive ID of who you're killing. It's just that they are acting in a way that would suggest they're terrorists.
Obama coming out trying to say, I know that 90% of the people we hit were not intended targets, but I had to do it. Matter of fact, people forget that, this has been an issue from the Obama administration from day one.
So, that is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
So, that is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
This is a story about how during the 1970s, the United States government covered up the existence of an underground snuff film ring.